Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up's annual Airing of Grievances. This is a yearly festivus tradition in which I take a more critical stance on Smash Up, but coming from a good place, while everyone else forgets that this is a game that I love. Choosing a topic this year was really hard, especially since I hadn't been uploading much lately. For those of you who are wondering why that is, there are 6 different reasons, none of which in isolation would be too much, but all combined together have been overwhelming. The first reason is that I got promoted at work this summer, and that has added considerable responsibility and frequently takes away my lunch breaks. Speaking of the 5th reason, there hasn't been a lot of Smash Up released this year, and I already unloaded on teens, but I wanted to take a more holistic look at EMD. So this year, I will be focusing on the expansion only. Before I start, I want to acknowledge that I do think that this is a good year for our community, particularly on the custom front. It's good to know that there is a lot of passionate players out there doing their best to dig into the game, expanding it, and making it better, ultimately taking those lessons back into the mainline product. So let's get to the grievances. Number 12 is Friends Through Eternity, requiring a discarded card to play 2 actions. This is an example of what I call the patented Smash Up discard, where it feels like someone wants to nerf a faction, so they throw in a discard somewhere for an ability that already exists. In the case of time loops, we have several, like Time Loop, Favor of Hermes, Celebration, even a double feature, and one that appeared in World Champs 2. Stapling on a discard is an odd phenomenon to me, because most of the time it doesn't matter, because you aren't going to play that card anyway, but when it does matter, it really hurts and makes you question why it is necessary. We saw this with Titans in the 10th anniversary, and I just have to ask, is there no other cost that we can think of? Do these cards really need a cost? If the faction needs a nerf, and I think action heroes do, find it in other places. Number 11 is the self-destruction on Head Grabber. Not every card needs to be fast, and while I normally value flexibility, this clause just stands out to me and not in a good way. It also makes the card unnecessarily long for what I imagine is a 5% use case at most. While it is not the direct cause of angst of Head Grabber's wording, I don't think it makes it any easier, and I dislike that you have to go 4 lines deep before you start to realize what the card is actually trying to do. In the case of speed, it is a modest upgrade at best, likely turning your partner 2 into something else. And I think it goes against the depowering and destruction the extra morphs provide. You already have to deal with overcoming the loss of assets due to destruction, so why would you impose that cost on yourself? I have friends who like it, but I think it's problematic and cumbersome, so it's a grievance, admittedly a minor one. Number 10 is Funbear Bro. I just question why, in 2023, 10 years into the game and counting, we still have minions like this that don't work. This is a solved problem. The fact that it is optional is not only indicative of a problem, but a problem itself, as that can slow the tempo down. A player will never agree to get the power unless it benefits them, but they have to decide after each play. The game is obsessed with these types of cards, and I just don't get it. Even if the player is conceding the base, they are doing it more efficiently, and when you are going for a camp-style play, you want to make them concede as expensively as possible. I just don't get it. Number 9 is Chessbreaker only allowing 3 or 4. Given its requirement for its talent, I don't think it's possible for Chessbreaker to loop with itself or another minion, and if you hit a Chessbreaker, that was your choice to do so. But you are mathematically more likely to hit your partner recruit if you chose to, and it wouldn't be much more wording to allow flexibility, unlike the wording in Head Grabber. And if that wording of power less than 5 is problematic, then it shouldn't be used in other cards. The problem is that Chessbreakers recur themselves, so you do run the risk of running low on 3s and 4s. I've definitely had moments where the Chessbreakers are in my hand, and I can get a better recruit, but the card won't let me do it. Consider this: the more minions you play from your deck, the more drawing them hurts you, and the more you'd want flexibility in those plays. If you don't want to target 0 or 1 for problematic interactions, then just make it 2, 3, or 4. While I have yet to Head Grabber myself, I have had occasions to wish for a Howler or a comparable minion, and it just seems silly that since it's your choice and at worst you could not choose it. This would definitely be a bandit gambit if you incentivize someone to not choose 4, and if you ignore an obvious bandit gambit, that's definitely a grievance. Number 8 is Rooftop Portal. There's a problem with this card, and it's not the spacing in between the words. This card created a ruling that is so bizarre you're going to think I'm making it up. We call it Base Gate. After you destroy a card here, draw a card. That includes Titans, minions, base modifiers, and minion modifiers, as it should. But because it says cards, you have to ask, does that include bases? Is a base at itself? Apparently it is, which wouldn't matter, but because of the revenge rule, if you destroy the base, you get to draw a card. While I like interactions, the idea of a base being at itself is insane. And here's the worst part. It's not even in the clarification. And it definitely came up. In a game that I love, it drives me absolutely crazy when an insane ruling is made, but not written down, especially when the card literally already has a clarification, and the clarification even has space for a few extra words, and I have to be the one who has to explain it like a crazy person. If you want to pretend like Basegate is a lie, by all means go ahead, because I wish it were. Number 7 is Funkman. Thoughts about the Ghostfacers aside, Funkman is a hybrid minion, and I question why that is. The more I play Ghostfacers and actually draw him, the more I realize, forget the first part of the ability exists. If all he had was the special, and you were designing a faction from scratch, would that be a leader level ability? I think it either is or is really close. You can save your race or other powerful base modifiers and potentially disrupt someone's plans, potentially even their special. I think to make it a full leader ability all the time, you can move one of your modifiers to there, in case you want to ignite Slimy for the power boost. When I see leader abilities like this, it really makes me feel like they are trying to compensate for a difficult game plan by failing to spread the balance around, which is also the case with number 6. Ellen does not need to play in action. You do not deserve to get 3 good things for destroying a Wraith that you may literally have just played moments before, especially not 4 things if Funkman is in play or Roy is there. What actions do they want to play? Almost all the actions are stall cards, offsetting the breakpoint production if you were to play it locally, and the idea of pre-stalling on the next base feels weird to me if you tell me that's something that they actually need. Number 5 is the text on not 1, not 2, but 3 bases. I'm at a complete loss as to why Jungle Camp and Ghostfacers HQ lack the when this base scores prefix. This is made more complicated because the game inexplicably doesn't label base abilities. But Broodhive has before this base scores, Debrief Crag has when this base scores, and Disney had a ton of afters, so why did they remove this wording? This is an awesome level 9000 mistake, and we're talking about the 19th expansion. It severely grates my nerves and I can't unsee it, but what do you expect when base abilities are part awesome? Look it up, that's literally still a rule in 2023. But here's a very real problem. When does this actually happen? I'm assuming that it is a when ability, but other people think it's an after ability. Returning to hand is in fact often an after ability. However, if it is when scoring timing, then any after scoring specials on that minion won't apply, as well as many ongoings. Consider the case of Baymax. If you want Baymax to save a minion and then be returned itself, whether that happens depends on when versus after. Why do I think that this is when and not after? Quite honestly, I think it is much less likely that they would forget to use the phrase after scoring because that is a way more common context. And what's really frustrating is how common this mistake was actually made in the past. Number 4 is our first crossover on this list because it's Ghostfacers HQ again. This is a bigger deal to me than others, but I find this to be a legitimate question. When do you actually need to decide what type of extra play you are earning? Is it at the time the base is scored, or when the play is actually utilized? This is, to my knowledge, the first uncertain play deferred until a future turn. Now this may be pedantic, but is a base ability a special or not? Because extra plays granted by special abilities are immediate, and this is very not immediate. So is the decision immediate? Maybe you should look up the definition of extra, because guess what card is featured in that picture? The headquarters. Not only does the definition of extra not cover this scenario, but there isn't a clarification for the card. And given that there is no rule that tells you either way, I strongly believe that there should be an official answer either way. Let's say that you had to decide in advance. This will absolutely affect how the next player will direct their turn. If you know that they are getting an extra minion over an action, they know certain plays won't be possible, whereas with no decision made, they have to play extra conservatively and plan for either case. I will admit that I play it as the decision is deferrable, but that question really should be answered, and I'm shocked it hasn't come up. It actually made me go back and comb through things, looking to see if Wand Wiz required you to choose up front, because I definitely love playing some Enchanted Evening into Wand Wizes into Restore Arcane Wisdom, having an extra play, and not knowing what I might draw changes that play drastically. In contemplating this question, especially when combined with the lack of clear timing from the previous grievances, I kept coming up with more and more ambiguities I won't go into here, and I just feel that this is easily avoidable. Number 3 is our second crossover, and yes, it's another of those 3 bases, Time Traveling Card. And if you played this base, you probably know what the grievance is already. There is a known rules gap about cards in play going into stasis. What happens to their attachments when they go in? What happens when they come out? This is unanswered in EMD, and I just question, how did this not come up? Probably because we know that the stasis rules are a convoluted mess already, and that's all I'm going to say, because I still don't know the answer to this question, and that answer completely changes the value of a card. If I can send my 20 power singularly powerful minion into stasis, and it comes back out as 20 power, I'm breaking that base every time. I don't know when we will ever get a concrete answer, and that's a grievance. Number 2 is World's Greatest Card. If you're sensing a theme that it's 2023, more than 10 years in, and there are certain things we shouldn't be doing anymore, this is definitely one of them. I don't care that World's Greatest Card can set up a successful play to get benefits from the top of the deck. Consider this card in isolation. It's a cantrip, so we have to subtract that out to see what this card is actually getting you, because there are other cantrips that do better things, and pure cantrips as well. The net result is simply this. You may do something objectively bad, just putting a card on top of your deck. There are so many other ways to solve the problem this card is trying to solve. This has the dual opportunity of standing out as the worst card from a value perspective, but also design perspective, as it just feels lazy. I've spoken at length about World's Greatest Card before, and it still made my list at an incredibly high spot, because I can't stand looking at it, but it still isn't my number 1 grievance, which is page 18 of the rulebook. Everything about this page is useless and frustrating. I have never been a fan of the faction descriptions, which are more color than actual descriptions or strategies, but these seem especially devoid of value, especially action heroes, which is a giant waste of space. And look what else is back. More factions. The only time I've ever heard of someone actually doing this were all sheep games, which players are going to do regardless of whether or not this is explicitly encouraged. But here's the thing. The game isn't tested this way at all. Not once, ever. This was removed in Culture Shock, probably for space reasons, so it took effort to put it back in. And I can prove this because it's in a different spot than International Incident. It's not like they just took it from the previous rulebook. If you remove that fake rule, and you remove the white space from action heroes, whose description feels like it didn't even try, then you haven't even used half the page. In a rulebook that still has known rules gaps, where an extra page could do wonders to flesh out the card resolution order, don't tell me that there isn't space for it, because there absolutely is. You are just wasting it. Honestly, no one buying this expansion needs that page. If you are buying the 19th expansion, you are hooked on the game and you understand it. You can read the cards yourselves and figure out what the faction is trying to do. No one is going to buy this as their entry point into the game. And if they did, they'd be screwed because there are no power counters. And I don't think that is a grievance. I think that's a good thing. The game system acknowledged that this is a piece of the puzzle and you have the other pieces already and it optimized accordingly. So why not do the same for the rulebook? Everyone knows the rulebook is insufficient, so there is zero room for waste, and every time I see this page, I can't help but be disappointed, especially when there are plenty of people who would love to help fill that extra page to polish the rulebook to the best extent possible. So please, just kill this page going forward. So there you have it. Those are my grievances for this year's EMDition. Were any of your grievances on the list? What made your list that didn't make mine? Let me know in the comments. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone, and Happy Festivus too. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.